Hi everyone, today we're going to be looking at how to answer 6-mark questions. Our learning objectives for today's lesson are to gain an understanding of how to answer a 6-mark question on one professional work. Your extra challenge is to include convincing interpretation and evaluation within your writing, and your literacy focus is to use subject-specific terminology with accuracy. We are going to focus on how to answer 6-mark questions in Section C of the exam paper. In your exam, there will be 3 6-mark questions in Section B, and there will be 1 6-mark question in Section C. You should apply the same structure that we learned today to the 6-mark questions in Section B. In Section C, you will also get a 1-mark question just before the 6-mark question, which will link together. When you receive your exam paper, you must read these questions very carefully. This is because the 6-mark question can be specifically related to the 1-mark question, or they can open the question out further. Here is an example of why you need to read the question carefully. The 1-mark question asks you to identify one action used in a linear curve. The first example of a 6-mark question could ask you to explain how the action content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun in a linear curve. This question stays focused on the action content as a whole. However, the second example of a 6-mark question asks you to explain how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun in a linear curve. This example opens the question up as there is now so much more to draw from it. The choreographic content could relate to the movement content, structuring devices and form, or the choreographic devices. This is much broader than the first example, which asks you to specifically focus on the action content. The questions in your exam paper might get even more specific, so it's important that you know the key terminology and have lots of examples to use in your writing. Here is another example of why you need to be careful when reading the question. The 1-mark question asks you to identify one relationship using infra. The first example of a 6-mark question asks you to explain how the relationship that you have named helps the audience's understanding of the choreographic intent and infra. This question is specifically focused on the relationship that you named in the 1-mark question. Therefore, you need to choose your relationship wisely and make sure the 1-mark and 6-mark question both talk about the same relationship. The second example of a 6-mark question asks you to explain how the use of relationships helps the audience's understanding of the choreographic intent in infra. This example opens the question out as you are now able to talk about more than one relationship used. This is much broader than the first example, which asks you to specifically focus on the relationship that you named in the 1-mark question. The contribution point in the question might also be specific or more general. It might, for example, ask you about one idea or theme in a work, or it might ask you about the choreographic intent as a whole. This means that you need to read the question extra carefully. Here is an example of how the contribution point might be more specific or more general, which requires you to read the question carefully. The 1-mark question asks you to identify one action used in a linear curve. The first example of a 6-mark question asks you to explain how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun in a linear curve. This question is specifically focusing on how the choreographic content, which could include reference to the movement content, structuring devices and form, or the choreographic devices, helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun. Having fun is one of a linear curve's choreographic intentions, which means that you can only talk about this intention for this question. Do not talk about how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of men pursuing or communicating or showing off to the women, which is the other choreographic intention of a linear curve, as you will receive 0 marks. The second example of a 6-mark question asks you to explain how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the choreographic intent in a linear curve. This example opens the question out as you are able to talk about any of the choreographic intentions in the work. This means that you can talk about how the choreographic content, which could include reference to the movement content, structuring devices and form, or the choreographic devices, and how this helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun, and the men pursuing or communicating or showing off to the women. This is much broader than the first example, which asks you to specifically focus on having fun. The choreographic intention of a work is the aim of the dance, or what the choreographer aimed to communicate. The choreographic intention can therefore include reference to the mood, the meaning, the idea, the theme, or the style of the work that you are looking at. The writing structure that we follow for 6-mark question is KEC. The K stands for knowledge. You will state the choreographic skill or production feature depending on the question. The E stands for example. You will then give a well-selected, short and snappy example from the work the question is based on. Finally, C stands for contribution. You will explain how this contributes to the idea of having fun, for example. This is again dependent on the question that you were given. Make sure you can remember what each letter stands for and what you need to include in each part of the structure. It is now your turn to attempt a 1-mark and 6-mark question. Your answers need to be short and snappy. Do not spend time waffling. You need to aim to complete at least 4 KEC extended sentences. For top marks, you should aim to complete more than 5 KEC extended sentences. In the exam, you will need to aim for a mark a minute, which means that you will only spend 7 minutes on these 2 questions combined. Remember to follow the KEC structure and get down as much as you can within the 7 minutes. Use a timer to time yourself. First, you need to identify one action used in Alina Curva, which is for 1 mark. And then you need to explain how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun in Alina Curva. This question is worth 6 marks. Now that you have written your answers in relation to the 1-mark and 6-mark question, we can now go through the mark scheme for the questions. The 1-mark question asks you to identify one action used in Alina Curva. You will receive 1 mark if you identified an appropriate action, such as a jump in parallel position, for example, or shimmy with the arms in second position. Give yourself a mark. The 6-mark question asks you to explain how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun. You could have referred to the movement content, structuring devices and form, or choreographic devices in Alina Curva. You then needed to give a clear example. For the 6-mark question, an example of an extended sentence could have been: in Alina Curva, 7 male and female dancers perform the Robson motif in a vertical line downstage facing stage left. This helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun as the dancers are in a line, one after the other, enhancing the idea of a Brazilian samba parade. They swiftly swing their arms above their head in a circular motion. The arms swing back down and then suddenly rebound to swing in front of the body. This mimics the idea of having fun, as when people celebrate or party, you often see the arms above the head. As you can see, I have highlighted the knowledge and example in red and the contribution in blue. This question was in last year's exam paper. The exam board just marked the example and contribution as the knowledge and example were the same thing. For example, the sentence, "They swiftly swing their arms above their head in a circular motion," is both knowledge and example, as you were given an example of the movement content which shows your knowledge. Here is the mark scheme for the 6-mark question in more detail. As you can see, you will receive 0 marks if there is no evidence or nothing worthy of credit. You will receive 1 mark if there is a limited description of how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun. You will receive 2 marks if you have given a description of how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun. You will receive 3 marks if you have given a limited explanation of how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun. You will receive 4 marks if you have given a sound knowledge and understanding of how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun and that you have provided examples. You will receive 5 marks if you have given a highly developed knowledge and understanding of how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun, which includes good examples that illustrate this. You will receive the full 6 marks if you have given an excellent knowledge and understanding of how the choreographic content helps the audience's understanding of the idea of having fun. You will have also given well-selected examples to illustrate this. Give yourself a mark using this mark scheme. Well done for today's lesson. We have looked at how to answer 6-mark questions. I hope you have gained a greater understanding of how to answer this type of question in your exam.